So thank you, James Tynion IV, for your time and for this interview. We are Batman Legend, a website dedicated to Batman fans, and we wanted to talk about Batman with you.
Yeah.
You write a lot of comic books about Batman.
Oh, yeah.
And not only Batman. Can you come back on your career? For start, and how did you become a writer for DC Comics?
So my way into comics is very weird and different from a lot of other comic creators. While I was in college, I had a writing professor who at that point had only written a collection of short stories, but they had a kind of genre bent to them, and he and I became very close friends, and that was Scott Snyder. Yeah. And Scott, while I was his student, was asked to pitch for the series that would become American Vampire. Okay. And then we started, he sent me the initial pitch, and I, rather than just being like, oh man, it's so cool, thank you so much for sharing this with me, I sent him a 10-page critique of the pitch, and he basically started sending me everything that he wrote after that. And we became very, very close friends. I became his writing assistant. And particularly once he started writing superhero comics, he had grown up with superhero comics, but was less familiar with the 10 years preceding his start, basically from when he had gotten out of college until that point in his adult life. But I had read all of that. So I had the up-to-date knowledge, and we were able to, we forged a partnership on that. And then at the start of the New 52, and the start of his Batman run, all of a sudden it was very successful, and DC reached out to him one day being like, hey, we want there to be 8 extra pages in every issue of Batman that will be a backup story, and we want you to write them. And at that point, Scott was working on too many books, and so he gave me a call and asked if I would be willing to co-write the backups with him. And at that point, I'd been pitching some creator-owned series and all of this stuff. I was not expecting my first ever published comic to be Batman number 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, you work in the Sarah Lawrence College, where you met Scott Snyder. How did you meet here? What you feeling about Scott Snyder?
Oh, I mean, he was a phenomenal teacher, and is to this day. He has this special ability that I've always envied incredibly, where he can look at a story that's put in front of him, and he can see the exact vertebrae of the spine that's out of alignment, and then he can figure out exactly how to push it into place so that the entire spine of the story comes together. He also, there are lessons that he taught me in that original class that then, he continued to sort of push me toward over and over in my career, which was basically that every story needs to be deeply personal to you. It doesn't matter if it's a creator-owned title or if it's a Batman book. There needs to be a part of yourself that you put into the comic. Otherwise, why should anybody care? And that as the central drive of all creative work is something that I still carry with me to this day. And
you continue to talk with him?
Oh, yeah. I had dinner with him on Sunday before flying out here.
We continue to talk with your relationship with Scott.
Yeah.
Scott Snyder. It's not complicated to be always associated with him.
Yeah.
It's complicated, or do you want to leave this this image of
to emancipate to
I think
him?
One thing that was helpful is I started my career very young. And so when I had little flare-ups of I want to be known as my own person, I kind of recognized that I would say my first 5 years of working at DC, I sort of saw that as me going to grad school. That was me training. And, the other thing is that when you're working at one of the superhero publishers, sometimes, it can be very difficult to convince the bosses to let you do the story you wanted to do. And I realized very early on that when I was working with Scott, I could convince Scott to let me do the story I wanted to do in a way that, when I wasn't working with Scott, I couldn't do it. So I was happiest with the work that I was doing under Scott's umbrella. And then I think over time, especially by the time I was on my Detective Comics run, I kind of proved that I had a voice that was very different from Scott's. Like Scott writes very singular stories that he's much better than me, frankly, at writing stories that have a single protagonist. Like his Batman stories are very much about Batman. I like writing ensembles. I like writing big casts. So my Detective Comics run was a team book, essentially. And even my Batman run had a large ensemble cast. And that's how I find pacing. That's how I enjoy writing. Like even in my creator-owned books, I have large casts. And so I think once I was able to show the comics industry that I was my own writer, at that point, I didn't really care. Like early on, there were a few people who would be like, "Oh, that's Scott Snyder light," and But at that point, I was 24 years old. Yes, I was Scott Snyder light. But then once I proved that I had something of my own to say, and now with my own creator-owned and everything, my creator-owned books are very different than Scott's, and but they come from a similar place because we're close friends. We have similar ranges of interest. We're both horror writers. We both come at Batman in particular from the lens of horror, but it's different. So it doesn't bother me that much.
So what do you think about the success of your work?
I mean, he's always been my biggest supporter, and which is why we're still incredible friends. With this past summer, I had the overwhelming experience of being handed the Best Writer Eisner at the Eisner Awards, the biggest comics award ceremony in the United States. And I was handed the award by Neil Gaiman and Frank Miller. Those were the two people on stage. And I was so overwhelmed that after the ceremony, I had to go step outside the hotel. And I was overwhelmed. I was crying. It was this was the culmination of my whole career, the previous 10 years. And Scott found me because he knew I was overwhelmed. And he was just comforting me because he knew what it was like to step up to that moment and that place in the industry. And I don't know, I value his friendship tremendously. Not just because he helped me pave the road to my career, but also just because he's a very good human being who has always had, looked out for me.
Scott Snyder must listen to this podcast because it's so beautiful. So about it, your name is everywhere. What's the secret to work in different projects? Batman, in Comics Independent, The Nice House on the Lake.
I mean, it's something
Not sleep.
that sleep is a big part of it. I could definitely stand to sleep a bit more. Honestly, it's something that when you're working on superhero comics, there's a lot of work that you end up doing that has nothing to do with writing. And I was working at such a fast pace for so many years. I did 2 Batman weekly comics in a row, and then followed that up with my Detective Comics run, which came out twice a month, and then my Batman run, which also came out twice a month for the first year. So it was every time that then I was able to sort of scale down a bit of my superhero work, I was able to add about twice as much independent work than I was able to do superhero work, because I didn't have to do the same level of I need to convince the bosses. I need to check with my fellow co-creators about where's Nightwing right now? Am I going to be contradicting what's happening in that book? And how to make it all click together. But yeah, it's I don't fully understand it, but right now I just make sure that every artist that runs out of pages gets more pages, and just keep everybody working. And it's just like juggling. You just have to keep the balls in the air.
Oh yeah, okay. Let's go back to Batman. What was your first encounter with with this character or this universe?
So my first, the first time I think I ever encountered Batman would have been the Batman Returns movie by Tim Burton.
Best movie on the world.
Oh yeah. And I was about 5 years old, and it was definitely a little scarier than what, you know, like the movies I had seen to that point, which just deeply fascinated me. Like it's like Batman Returns is the start of me being obsessed with like spooky things, which would lead to my career as a horror writer, and also my obsession with Batman and the world around Batman, which would lead to my career as a Batman writer. So it really all started there. But what really coalesced it was was watching the Batman animated series, which I still think is the quintessential Batman. It is the most Batman there is. And those incarnations of Batman himself and his rogues gallery are the ones that are just seared into my brain. And, you know, when I write Batman, I've always heard Kevin Conroy's voice.
For the Joker War, the Joker found a new companion, Punchline. What is the inspiration about her on maybe to talk about Harley Quinn on the Punchline?
So, you know, some of it started a little, it was by necessity a little bit. So my Batman run came directly following Tom King's run, and Tom came after Scott Snyder, and Scott Snyder came after Grant Morrison. All three of those writers wrote a very solitary Joker. And I knew that that I wanted to put my own spin on Joker. I wanted to lean into different aspects of the character. And one thing that I had wanted to bring back was the idea of the Joker gang. And the idea of clowns like as this chaotic force around Gotham City inspired by the Joker. But I do see Joker as solitary enough that he's not going to organize a group of clowns. So he needs a number two that would do that organization. And, you know, the person who used to fill that number two slot was Harley Quinn. But to regress Harley Quinn as a character back into that role would just be, it would do a disservice to the
character.
character.
Is independent.
Yeah. And so I knew I needed to create a new figure for this. And around the time that I was thinking about that, we found out that we were, you know, when I had started my run, I was told I wasn't allowed to use Harley because I think she was in Suicide Squad or something at the time. And then I think actually Tony Daniel drew her onto a cover, and the cover like was solicited. So it was like, all right, now you have Harley and you can use her. And I was like, great, because I wanted to use her from the beginning, because if we were going to do a Joker War story, I wanted Harley in a key role. And, you know, so, and then I realized like, okay, now I can build a character who's in this lieutenant role, who can be effectively the anti-Harley Quinn. You know, and I wanted to basically create the character that if Harley was the angel on Joker's shoulder, Punchline is the devil on his shoulder, where Harley saw the humanity that didn't exist in Joker. Punchline sees the like politician that doesn't exist inside Joker, the ideologue. Like she believes that he stands for something and that he means something when he doesn't stand for anything. And, you know, he thinks all of it, it's all kind of silly, the idea that he has a coherent ideology. So I wanted to lean into all of that and build a character that was, you know, representative of the, you know, internet radicalization and the impression of Joker over the city for decades, and the fact that, you know, it's only natural that a few people, rather than gravitating towards Batman and believing in Batman, some people would believe in the Joker more. And so I wanted to lean into all of that, but the piece that brought it all together was seeing Jorge Jimenez's design for the first time. And the second I saw the design of Punchline, I was like, okay, we've got something here. And, you know, immediately I was just like, all right, we're going to like make this a big character. And you know, and we did.
Yeah, you think to the origin story at the beginning, or it's coming after the?
it came along the way, I would say. Like, it was something that, you know, it definitely went through a few different versions in my head, but it was, there were elements that I knew were going to be a part of it from the beginning. Like, I knew that she was essentially, to a certain degree, a Joker fangirl that then becomes this terrifying figure. And, you know, so that I had from the beginning, but the specific steps in that story, I like to, you know, the first time I write a character, you start finding the voice of the character on the page. And especially when you're working with artists that are bringing that character to life, you want to be able to lean into their traits that way. So it's like, honestly, I didn't want to decide too much about her before I had a chance to really meet her in the process of writing.
Okay. We noticed that you created several new characters. Punchline, but Miracle Molly too.
Yeah.
Why is this important for you to create new character? Is this a way to leave your mark in the Batverse, maybe, or something like that?
I mean, that's definitely part of it. Like, part of the fun of working in a shared universe is you get to take all of the toys out of the toy chest and play with them. And in exchange for that, I wanted to leave some toys in the toy chest. But beyond that, so many of those characters came from 10 years of working in and around Gotham and seeing holes where there should be characters in the mythology. And I, in writing the two Batman Eternal and Batman and Robin Eternal, I recognize, Batman doesn't have a villain that he can go to that's tech-based, that can, literally, if the Batmobile, breaks down, he could go and get a souped-up version of the Batmobile with a morally gray character like Miracle Molly, who would be able to, soup it up and, while also challenging him on his beliefs and all of that. And that was a character that there were pieces of that of her that had existed in my brain since working on the first Batman Eternal. But the other character that had been in my head in various forms for a long time was Ghostmaker. I really, I had wanted to do a kind of Young Adventures of Bruce Wayne book for a long time. And there was a character that existed in the concept for that book, which was essentially Batman's rival, in a very manga way, where it was just okay, Bruce is going around training under all of these masters. It always just made sense to me that there had to be someone else who was going around and training under all of the same masters, who they both had an inferiority complex about each other, that they would be kind of mirrors and all of that. And when I came onto my Batman run, it was right after the Alfred had died in the City of Bane storyline.
Spoiler.
Oh, sorry. But there was no longer a character in the Batman mythology who could challenge Bruce, who had known Bruce for most of his life. Because all of the supporting characters around him were people he had trained, who have a kind of subservient role to him, even though they've built up a kind of equality. But even Nightwing was trained by Batman. His worldview comes from Batman. When Alfred, the power of Alfred is always that Alfred can tell Bruce he's wrong. And I wanted to create a character who could tell Bruce that he was wrong, who also Bruce thinks is wrong about lots of things. But I wanted to create that dynamic and have a character who could challenge him, who also just would look super cool and, be interesting to see on the page and interact with all of these characters, and give him a complicated, friendship rivalry. And, and then once again, Jorge Jimenez designed a really, really freaking cool costume, and, the rest is history.
And now, what is the title around Batman that you preferred to write, and why?
I mean, there's an credible power to the main Batman title. Like, just the, you know, I spent my entire career sort of coming up through all of the side channels around the main Batman title. I started in the backups of the main Batman title, and then I went off to write Talon, which was about like brand new character that existed off to the side of Gotham. I wrote Red Hood and the Outlaws for a little bit, so that was a step closer to the center. And then through Batman Eternal and Batman and Robin Eternal and my detective run, I was able to play with all of the Bat family characters who I had known and loved my entire reading life. But there is no beating sitting in the driver's seat of the Batmobile. When you have that position, you are able to make a mark on the line. When you introduce a new character, that character is more likely to be picked up by the other books, which is part of why I made as many characters as I did. And I'm thrilled that even though I'm no longer working on superhero comics right now, that all of these characters that I created, like Punchline has her own miniseries right now, Ghostmaker is leading a team of Batman Inc., Miracle Molly showed up for a bit. The characters are in play, and Gardner's been showing up in Poison Ivy. I saw potential and function in these characters, and I saw that they had a chance to be lasting figures within the line. But I would never. A single writer can't do that. I put them in play. Other people have to want to pick them up and use them. And seeing other people want to pick them up and use them is the most fulfilling thing.
And do you prefer Batman with the Bat family or Batman alone?
I mean, if you had asked me that question before I wrote my Batman run, I would always say Batman with the Bat family, because I love the Bat family. They are my favorite characters. And I think that fundamentally, Batman, the larger story of Batman is about the Bat family. It's the story of a man who lost his family at a young age, who then builds himself into this perfect engine to prevent what happened to him, who starts building a new family out of other people who had been sort of hurt in the same way. And he protects them from having to go through the same torment he did. I see that as this fundamental thing. But then in my Batman run, I wanted to challenge myself to not write that style, of thing. But so I just leaned into a lot of villains, and I leaned into a lot of and the power of Batman is you could tell any type of story with him. It is such a simple, powerful idea. The idea of, overcoming the worst moment in your life. And that can, as long as that piece is there, it's a Batman story. It's that, and then, a cape and a cowl. Everything else, you could do anything. You could go Lego Batman movie to, the darkest, Black Label take on the character. And it's all Batman. Yeah. And I think we don't value enough how flexible the character is, because it's very rare. There's always the Marvel versus DC thing. And I think that where Marvel often has the upper hand is that the characters have a deep humanity and depth of history that because DC changes its history so often it can't match. But there's so much power in a simple idea, and a simple iconic idea. And I think Batman, more than almost any other character other than Superman, is the character who most belongs in the pantheon of great hero characters over history, like Robin Hood or Sherlock Holmes. And to the point that I think they'll always, in the same way that even though it's not coming out every month, there's still a Robin Hood story every few years. There's still a Sherlock Holmes story every few years, and it's just I think we're going to be coming back to this character over and over forever.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Finally, can you tell us about upcoming projects?
Yeah. So right now I am, the only licensed book I'm doing, non-creator owned, is I'm working on Sandman Universe Nightmare Country at DC right now. Which it's a great time to be working on a Sandman book, especially one that centers the Corinthian, with the Netflix Sandman series coming out. But I had finally made the firm decision that I was going all in on creator owned, and I wasn't going to write anybody else's characters. And then my editor at DC reached out to me, and this is the editor he was my editor on Detective Comics, on both Eternals. And he reached out to me and was just like, all right, so we're thinking about getting the Sandman universe up and running again. How would you like to take point on that? And I was sent back like a string of curse words at him because it was just, he knew I couldn't say no to that, and I didn't. And so I'm working on that. But aside from that, I'm working on a whole slate of creator-owned titles like Nice House on the Lake, Something is Killing the Children, Wind, The Department of Truth. So cool. Yeah. And I've got more in the wings. So I love writing comics, and I'm going to keep on doing it.
Oh yeah.
Oh, and thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.